Do a roll call vote with just the two of us then. So Mark, are you present?
Yes.
And I am also present. Okay. Um, so I mean, we might have to repeat all this obviously for Lee. But Chris, do you want to give any updates?
Sure. Yeah. There's not much to report for updates. There's the the legislature has been very unusually busy. That hasn't really impacted our work. We're still waiting for copies of the contracts from the Office of Economic Development. They said that they've been liaisoning with their colleagues and the Executive Office of Administration and Finance, and they're hoping to get us contracts any week. We just continue to put pressure on them to issue those contracts, and they're
Yeah.
trying to get them out.
Okay. Sorry. One thing, Lee just texted me. He can hear us, but he can't unmute. Shannon is host. Can you unmute him?
Probably ask him to unmute.
Yeah, I think he's trying to unmute, but can't.
Yeah, I mean, you can issue an
Oh,
ask,
I see what you're
which
saying.
gives him
Yeah.
something to click on, and it might work. But I think it depends. Well, I've never figured out Zoom on a phone, really.
Yeah. Well, Lee, we understand you can hear us, but can't say anything.
Right.
Oh, no, he's gone. Okay. So Chris and I talked about this I mean, this state has to understand if they don't give us a contract, it's kind of, they're cutting down on the time for us to use the funds, right? I'm assuming there's some sort of sympathy on that side. So I guess at least there's that. Chris and I were talking how obviously it's not like Lee is going to be negotiating the contract for the town, but it would be good for someone on our board to understand once it actually comes to us what it says. So that's my only point in having Lee take a look at it so that he can report back what the actual mechanics are. I mean, he might have a comment or two for you, but it's between, I don't know. So I guess we'll just keep our fingers crossed that comes in soon. Sorry, Chris, anything else?
Yeah, so Elizabeth, we did formally hear back from Economic Development that they have acknowledged these separate earmark requests, and they will be treating them as both for the town of Concord. So it's usually that those earmarks get aggregated. It's very unusual to see, earmarks to the same town for the same purpose in different amounts in the same section of the budget bill. And I think that's probably just they're very busy and they just failed to reconcile that during the conference committee. But
So
yeah,
practically speaking, does that just mean we're gonna have to deal with two contracts, but otherwise it's gonna be?
it should be one. I mean, it's the same section of the budget. It should be one contract to the town of Concord for the 725.
So is there any practical implications to them treating it as two allocations? Or two earmarks?
Until we see the contract, we really can't say. I don't think there are any practical implications, whether it's two or one.
Okay, I guess as long as we get the money.
Yeah.
I think it just means that there's more money that we might not be able to spend in time.
Yes, that's great. It's a win for everyone. Okay, that's great. Go ahead.
But as a practical matter, I think it does really create a situation where we have about as many resources as we can think of, and I think it just behooves us to responsibly use them. And I'm glad the other two groups are both working on their RFP. I don't think that the contracted, the lack of having it is really holding anything back yet, because I still think that on our side we're still in that specifications and RFP issuing time frame. But
I agree. And I guess to this point, and then Chris, sorry, you might have more updates. I had Shannon forward you the email from Alan.
yes.
Alan and I met last week, and basically it sounds like they're just trying to get their head around everything too. Sounds like it was a little bit of a, I don't know what a good appropriate word is to use, but with the transportation coordinator leaving and having that other contract out there. So I understand Alan's point of wanting us to kind of back off for a second while he figures everything out. But the one thing, so this kind of goes into what our charge is, because obviously if the land use subcommittee is going to do the RFP, which we had kind of thought that we might take control of that, what are we doing? And I wrote this to Dan and I said, so what do you envision us doing? Should we be the collectors of the budget request and kind of keep compiling that, which I kind of think we should, because Alan said basically he's going to be looking at this $725,000 too. So I think when we're all, Chris, right? I mean, I haven't been under anesthesia for a lot of days now, but still just sanity check. When he's looking at where the money's going to come from to do some of the transportation studies on the rotary and all that, he'll be looking at the same pot of money.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I don't know if Alan was really presenting it as like a competing use of funds and more, maybe there's feasibility studies or some sort of like other analyses that can be done for the wastewater treatment facility where funds from this earmark can be used to fund that work. But yeah, he did talk about it as, as a possible source of funding.
I don't see that as competing. I see it as that I feel that maybe our committee has been thinking that we're the only ones with our eyes on it for now, or that we're going to be the ones to decide, and that it's really important. I'm really glad we started the conversation with Alan so that we understand that money is going to be needed for all of that. And I kind of think if we as a subcommittee, and you guys can tell me, become where all of the budget requests go, just to kind of get compiled, that at least we'll be able to know who's asking for what, and get outside people kind of thinking about what they need. So I wrote that to Dan. Dan said he and Patrick were going to discuss it. He thought there was some merit to that, but I haven't heard anything else.
Yeah, I think that it's certainly a role we could play. The response on the Department of Transportation stuff too, I continue to think that we should look at what's really going on to the extent we can and look for white space there. I'm particularly concerned about whether or not, or how we're sort of studying or collecting local transportation needs or ideas about what local circulation might be, because I'm not convinced that the state Department of Transportation is going to care that much about anything except for Route 2 on ramps and off ramps. And that's probably not sufficient to provide input to visioning. And so I don't want to lose that. I think we should have a conversation with Alan about whether he thinks that's covered in the Stantec work. And if it is, great. But if it isn't, I think that it's an opportunity to do some work in parallel with some of the other groups to really sort of flesh out, at least the baseline of what's going on.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It sounds like they haven't received anything really from Stantec or haven't gotten even their teeth into it yet. So my conversation with Alan, I think Alan totally agrees and understands with that it's not just that one part. But absolutely. And I think now that we're on his radar, definitely can press that point. And I hope, Chris, my understanding is when all that Stantec stuff does come, he will let us have a look at it so we understand, to Mark's point.
Yeah, he's happy to come back. So I think he had been planning to join on Monday, and then when we reschedule the meeting, he's not available. So he's happy to come back and provide an update on the Stantec contract and the scope of work and that stuff. So maybe just a few more weeks.
I think related to that.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say related to that on the advisory board side, and even, there's a certain amount of wrangling of, what's the Transportation Advisory Committee doing? What are the other groups in the advisory board? If we can sort of straighten out who's actually on point to figure out the transportation requirements, so that that's, one conversation that's taking place in a certain place that we're inviting stakeholders in, that's also a good thing to do, because at some point that's going to need to be going to need to be worked on. And so I think that our message back to the rest of the land use and outreach group is, if they want us to do that, fine. If they feel like it's very important for them to do it, then, have that conversation. But let's pick a point person or a point group for that particular topic, and then let them, oversee it, at least for this phase, which I think of as the information gathering and preparing for visioning phase.
Yes, I agree with you. And I think, yeah, you're right. If community outreach wants to deal with it, that's one thing. But I also think, again, to me, the budget is kind of another piece of it. And it'll
Right.
let us kind of make sure nothing's getting lost, to your point of the white space. I did really feel that it was very productive what's happened in the last few weeks, and that going to Alan and being able to say, we've now decided that this is what we're going to do, is take some control of it. It was probably a relief to Alan, Chris. I don't know if that there's actually someone that he can talk to. So, and
Right.
he knows where he's going. So to your point also though, John Boynton sent out a little presentation he's giving at the League of Women Voters meeting, and he wanted us to fill in, or I guess he wanted me to fill in what we've done so far and what we're planning on doing. It's a little hard for me to do because I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I would say, I could say we're establishing relationships with appropriate committees and
Mhm.
make sure that there's no, I mean, I don't know I like your white space term, but
Yeah.
maybe I'll just say potentially compiling budget requests. to make
Right. I think that's fair.
Okay.
I assume, we can talk about Friday, but I assume that I'm covering for you on Friday, and I could talk to that as something that's evolving. I'm very comfortable with the idea that we're developing this process, this program and plan, and that's going to take us a little bit of time. So we can say where we are and where we think we're going, reserving the right to change that as we learn more, which we're already doing.
Let's wait till you see it. The community subcommittee seems like they have so much they have like 20 things listed out. But to be fair, their charge was pretty easy.
Yeah, and their things are leading, and I think we could discuss whether or not I thought it was maybe Dan's suggestion that we might take on zoning on the back end, which is something that all this work has to lead up to, can't start until a bunch of other things happen first. But if we're okay with that, then we can go for it.
So
Yes.
Mark, what I might do is share that document with you too,
Please.
the one
Yeah.
John did, and then you
Okay.
can also add to it. Hi, Shannon.
Did you see the letter that the community outreach subcommittee put together to make contact with their stakeholders?
Yes.
So I wanted to discuss that with you guys. Donna, Megan, and I met with John Boynan yesterday just to discuss some of the things the community outreach committee wants to do, and how we can help them in the meantime. And I was discussing with John, I think at first he was thinking that, as the government affairs subcommittee, this group could send the letter to the government agencies and the legislators. I wanted to put a feeler out to you all about that, because what I said to John and what I said to you too is that letter doesn't quite make sense if it is going to be coming from your group.
Mm-hmm.
But the alternative that we discussed yesterday with John is maybe just letting the community outreach subcommittee send this letter to everyone at this point, and then there could be follow-ups from you all as you want to start reaching out to some of the agencies, but this is totally up to you guys. But the letter would have to be tweaked if it comes from you is all.
Okay. Lee?
Sorry. Just for the record, I heard the beginning of the meeting. Sorry.
Yay.
But which correspondence are you referring to right now?
This is a letter that the community outreach subcommittee drafted to be distributed to the list of stakeholders that they put together.
Did it go to this whole committee, this subcommittee?
Yeah, I feel like I have not seen that, but maybe
It was I think Shannon put it in her email to us with
All right, I got it now.
agenda and everything, right?
Okay,
It's, yeah, the way it's written right now, it is directly coming from the community outreach subcommittees.
Yeah.
That's why I say if this group does want to make initial outreach to the subcommittee, I think it almost needs to be a different letter.
yeah. I kind of agree with that. I think that at some point, when we reach out to one of those groups, it's probably going to be, you know, in the form of a meeting or collaboration or an ask of some kind. I think that it's perfectly appropriate for them to be contacted in, you know, if you want to keep track of what the community of Concord is doing as a whole, outreach and public engagement, sign up for this list and you'll be informed in that way. And I think that when we do reach out to those agencies or legislators or whoever, it's better for us to really do something that's not on in the form of a form letter. That's my reaction. Lee?
Just reading this briefly, it strikes me as more written to residents, citizens, maybe even other subcommittees rather than legislators. That's number one. And number two, if it is going to legislators or even the public at large, should it, I wonder whether it should be coming from the advisory board as a whole.
Right.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. If you all feel like that it should be coming from the advisory board as a whole, that's.
Doesn't bug me having it come from the subcommittee. To me, it seems that I think Shannon, to your point, we're just trying to kind of filter people to the right place, right? And so I would assume that your point about putting out one of these for us is just so that if someone's in an agency and they're like, who are we supposed to talk to? They know to come to us. So this doesn't bug me, Lee, to your point, if they want, because I think that people should be directed directly to the community subgroup or outreach subgroup. And I also agree, Mark, that we should reach out individually to the agencies once we get to that point. But what worries me a little bit is just that we make sure we collect in a comprehensive form or comprehensive list of all the agencies we should be reaching out to. So we don't lose any of them.
Right.
So I guess if something comes in through this community subgroup that we know, like I can't think of anything we're not thinking of, but some historic group or something, you know, so if we could just keep an eye on that, maybe we start a master list of our own.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think a good starting point for that list is this came up at last week's sort of DCAM coordination meeting. And this is really just a list of agencies that are in the legislation that DCAM must coordinate with. And besides ourselves, it's, you know, state housing and livable communities, Mass DOT, the Department of Correction, the Concord Select Board, the Advisory Board, the Concord Housing Development Corporation, MAPC, ULI Boston Northeast, Concord Business Partnership, and ORS. So, you know, I think that's probably a starting list for us to have on our radar, you know, including ourselves of people. And then we could obviously add to that. My point right off the bat was, you know, ORS is something somewhat loaded because of the Warner's Pond questions. And so, you know, that needs to be, I understand their role in waterways, but we may also want to make sure that some Concord community groups like the Warner's Pond Task Force or something else, the NRC is involved in discussions about, you know, how the waterfront areas.
Okay, so can you all see my screen right now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sorry, go ahead, Jen.
The list that John made,
Right.
about 100 stakeholders long.
Yeah.
The first ones named are the ones that you just named.
Right.
And marked as you being the lead, the subcommittee being the lead.
Yeah.
And then as you scroll down, it's a lot of town committees, community groups, youth sports groups, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But so, and then there were some other state agencies listed, not listed in the legislation directly that were also on here that were listed with you all as the lead.
Mhm.
I would be weary for you all to make a separate list just because I
Yeah.
think that John has done a good job making this one so far, and I would
Do
just
we
be
have this? I apologize, we probably do. Is this on that email as well?
I didn't put this on the email because, to be honest, I wasn't sure that we were gonna discuss this, but I can.
Yeah, I
definitely
think this is fantastic. I have no, I mean, I don't want to recreate this. Yeah, do you
Yeah.
mind scrolling down? So they've taken on a lot of, I mean, I was gonna say, oh yeah, see, they've already done it for us. Fantastic.
Yeah,
I agree with it
I would just
too.
be happy to make sure that all of the
Mhm.
agencies, et cetera, that you want on this list are on the list. And what I've been doing as of recently is trying to populate the contacts.
That's
um,
awesome.
of these groups. But so I could just make sure that the ones that you want are definitely on there. And then really this can hopefully be utilized by the full board.
Okay, that's great. I'm so happy to see that. Lee, I don't want to get away from your point that if you feel strongly that this letter should come from the whole committee, I mean, I'm not opposed to it. I just think it might be a confusing. I mean, it mentions the full committee and says this is the subgroup of it.
I don't feel strongly, but from my perspective, I think it's more confusing that it's coming from the subcommittee.
Hmm.
But, so this letter or something close to it is gonna go to those list of 100 groups? Is that the idea?
Is that right, Shannon? Sorry.
Yes, that is what the community outreach subcommittee wanted to do.
Well, then to that point, it shouldn't go to the people that we say we have the leaders on.
Yes, that's what I was discussing at the start of this, which was, either we need to really tweak that letter to make sure it makes sense that it's coming from this group. Or the community outreach subcommittee makes the initial contact and you all follow up. As you have requests or want to schedule meetings. But then in that case, I mean, it's still just. That the letter doesn't feel great going to these groups if you want to be the main.
Yeah. Okay, now it's all clicking for me. So what if, so I guess in theory, I don't have any problem with them sending this to all the groups that they said they have the lead on, and then we should probably send our own, just an introductory letter. So Mark, to your point, obviously we would reach out more, but to the groups that we have lead on, does that make sense? And Lee, does that solve your? I agree with you. It does get confusing. I also don't want to have everyone in the world come to us, so I'm also trying to,
I think that makes sense. One way to do it might be to sort of tweak the introduction paragraph to say, we're the subgroup, either insert us or the community affairs group accordingly, communicating with you on behalf of the MCI advisory board to let you know that we're your single point of contact kind of thing. And
yeah.
that
I
way,
agree with that.
yeah,
More like the board was created, maybe a reference to a portion of our charge or mission statement, whatever
Yeah.
it's called. And then, we're the subcommittee and this is what we're doing. Please reach out to us for these.
right.
trips.
Yeah, and then, go to the whole board for approval of that and,
That's
in
what
the
I was
case.
just gonna say. It sounds like we could tweak this to go to the whole board on Monday for
Yeah,
approval.
yeah. I like that idea.
I like that too. I hate to put it on your plate, Shannon. Do you have
No,
time?
no, that's okay.
That's
I
awesome.
think it's better to flush this out now because, like. Everyone wants to start getting moving on things, so I do think better to run it by the full board, and then take the next steps.
Okay, so then the approach would be if they're okay with that, then we just
Mhm.
pull out the people that we're taking the leads on and send that to them. But that means we should probably, I'll take another look at that list, see if once you send it to us, Shannon, make sure there's nothing that I think should be us and not them, but that's great. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so, looking at the second paragraph, it, talks about what community outreach subcommittee does, but we could also, I mean, it gets a little longer, but introducing the other subcommittees, legal and government, deal with legislators and state agencies, if and land use will deal with planning and visioning kind of things. And that makes it a little bit more generic.
Are we saying two different things? Because Shannon, so Mark, you're making this more generic and saying send it out to everyone. To say there's 3 subcommittees, and I was saying make one really tailored to us and just send it out to the
We
people
could
that
do
we.
that.
Is that?
Yeah, I was just thinking about, it wouldn't make sense to have for us to actually lift the body of this letter and send all that stuff about community outreach, but it might be sensible to reference the fact that there is a community outreach group that's going to be doing public.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then say, as the government and legal affairs subcommittee, we'll be your source of contact or your point of contact. Okay.
Something like that.
Okay, that sounds great.
Okay.
Lee, was there anything else you wanted to comment on that you didn't get to comment on at the beginning? You heard everything about DOT and.
Yep.
Mhm.
Chris, was there any other updates?
Let's see. We talked about the state legislature, DOT, economic development. There's, Department of Corrections is really managing the operations over there now. And they are in constant contact with DCAM. So there's a very slow handover going on between DOC and DCAM. Yeah, I think that's pretty much the extent of my updates today.
Do you feel like there's been a little bit of shift in DCAM's attitude now that our committee has said we're going to take on the kind of the more official planning role?
Yeah, I mean, DCAM, I definitely defer to Megan. She's the staffer, the town liaison at DCAM, but they have been very accommodating and helpful. So
Awesome.
I think they continue to show an interest in being a real partner with the town. And so I think they're fine with that shift.
Yeah, I'll say yes. We talked about that a little bit on Friday with Abby and Paul, and they're by the way, I think Abby and Taylor from DCAM are planning to be there on Friday to hear what the league says, and we talked about the value of trying to understand when we're going to get deliverables from our consulting and visioning, and whether or not that can slot into their schedule for needs for the RFP. So we're trying to understand what their requirements are according to the legislation that they have to meet, and figure out ways to line that schedule up so that we can do that work. So I would say they're relieved by the fact that we're stepping up to it. And, they've expressed a willingness to coordinate from a scheduling perspective. So I think that's all good.
That's great. I'm really glad to hear that. All right. I don't really have anything else. Does anyone have anything we have to approve minutes now that Lee's here.
Yeah, so I'll make a motion again to approve the October 1st and October 17th Legal and Government Affairs Subcommittee minutes as distributed.
Second.
Great. All in favor, Mr. Howell.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
And Ms. Akers-Moore says yes. Okay, great. Did anyone have anything else? It sounds like yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I'll just make one little update. The Warners Pond Task Force met last night, and there was basically on the development of a proposal for a dredging project or a potential dredging project at 3 different levels. And Jeff Quick, who serves ex officio representing the Department of Corrections, was there indicating support for the Department of Corrections to use that north field, which is the area between the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail and Route 2. It's Department of Corrections property that's going to remain part of the Northeast Correctional Facilities property. So it's outside of this, as a possible receiving location for the dredging spoils that would come out of Warner's Pond if we did a dredging project. So it's very advantageous for the town because it would allow us to essentially pump the stuff right over there and dewater it. You know, you pump dredging over there, or you pump water back into the pond, and you don't have to truck it anywhere. So there would be a memorandum of understanding developed if that proposal were to, you know, win out and we were to go ahead. There's also some discussion of timing that might allow for we need to remove the topsoil from the field before you do that, and so that you can put it back. But some material may be taken from there and brought over to the StarMet site too, because apparently EPA will help us move it there at their expense. So the only reason I'm mentioning that all is because I think that it's worth it to understand from a context perspective that, you know, this takes some pressure off the MCI site proper, because that was actually one of the original potential locations for dredging if we do a dredging project on Warner's Pond. And it's, you know, I think again, a touch point between ourselves and the Department of Correction that we should be aware of that context.
That's great. Thank you.
The other thing I did, you know, I had a to-do from the last meeting, which was to take a look at our charge. And the overall advisory board charge, I think we talked about whether or not it needed to be updated. And the specific question was whether there was anything in it that kind of precluded our our work with the consultants. And I would say no. It was open-ended enough that we can go ahead and get all the consultants we want. I think that there is room, and the select board actually contemplated re-looking at the charge every 6 months. It was last amended on June 17th, so that would put us in the middle of December. And at that point, we could, you know, obviously update it to include the fact that the budget, you know, was passed, it provided for funding, we have that to spend. And it could be more directive about saying that it is up to the advisory board to work with town staff to spend it in procurement. So there's some options there. If you want me to take that further, I will make some specifics, but the short version is there's nothing that stops anything that we're talking about doing now, but it could be, you know, could be brought forward a little bit more directive, and I think the select board would be happy to do that if the advisory board ever felt like they needed that support. And so we could work on that if we want.
That's great. I mean, in my mind, as long as it's not precluding us from doing anything, I'm
Right.
okay with it, but
Yeah.
Yeah, if there's nothing precluding, but I know, I haven't looked at the charge that recently, but I remember the last time I looked at it, to me, it does feel very community outreach focused.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I do think, you know, on December 2nd, I think is when Dan and Patrick are supposed to present their budget to
Yeah.
select board. So it seems like it could be easy enough to just include some of the language about, you know, the advisory board is actually going to take the lead on the visioning process in that main body of the charge.
Yeah, no, to your point, I think it would be nice to see it in writing. I think it would get our heads all kind of
Yeah.
cemented in that direction. So, but that's a full advisory board question, right, Mark?
Right.
But I'd be
Yeah, I mean, the first duty is begin community outreach to learn the preferences of Concord residents and create a foundation for informed, sustained dialogue with townspeople, hold at least one public forum, solicit ideas. So that's what it kind of says. Obviously, we're going a lot further than that. It also talks about convening listening sessions, focus groups, interviews with community stakeholders. It just doesn't exactly say what resources are available to do all of that. It just says, get those things done. So like I said, I don't find it restrictive, but it could be more prescriptive if we thought that.
Yeah. I mean, I think again, just for the good of our committee, knowing what we're doing,
Right.
having it laid out would probably be good.
Yeah.
Great.
So I figured we could talk about that more over time, and I would think that if we wanted to propose it, we might target it for something like December so that it comes in around the time of the report.
Great.
Okay.
Sounds good to me. Lee, did you have something?
3 things.
Okay. Great. Go ahead.
They're
One.
quick. They're quick.
Uh,
So the first Friday, League of Women Voters this week, is it accurate that just Dan and Patrick are presenting in that?
Mark, I think, so John is planning on presenting and asked if the other subcommittee
Okay.
chair will be there, and Mark is gonna be there for me, so I would say you probably are gonna get a chance to speak, Mark, and also, like I said, John circulated this slide he's gonna put up that shows what each subcommittee is doing.
So effectively, any of all the other members of the advisory board will be sitting in the audience. Just if they-
Yeah, there's also, this might factor in I believe that the community outreach subcommittee is posted to meet at 9:30, just a few minutes ahead, to sort of coordinate it over the last minute and get to see what John has put together. But I think the intention is to let John be the primary presenter on behalf of the board overall, maybe supported by Patrick, because he's part of that community outreach group too, and the rest of us are sort of there to help field questions and support the dialogue.
Just my own personal opinion, I think at least as a courtesy, it would be nice if they circulated the slide deck to the whole board before Friday, but it's a commentary. Then
Yeah, I think that's fine. I can say something to John because I got to write back to him about that slide anyway.
I'm not suggesting that everyone, beat the thing up and last minute changes, but let's see what it looks like before the rest of the general public.
Yeah.
And then second is really just more procedural. What time is the full board meeting on Monday?
Shannon.
What? 12
Yeah.
in person at town house?
Yeah, hybrid if you want to be on Zoom.
Okay, and then is that also the same presently for the 2 weeks later?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes. We haven't made that switch yet to the monthly meetings, if we even are going to do it yet. So I don't know what you guys want to do about this committee. I don't mind touching base every couple weeks.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be a super long meeting, but
I think if I remember, the consensus was at the last meeting to keep on going every other week until the RFPs are issued.
Okay.
Yeah.
With the idea being that the RFPs are critical and we want to get them done. And once we've kind of got that process going, you should be able to relax this task.
my thought, it probably would be helpful for us to meet in 2 weeks because it'll be after the League of Women Voters and after the next full board meeting. Is that all right with everyone? And if so,
The date and time, please.
I know I was going to say what date and time. Let's see.
So 2 weeks from Monday is Veterans Day, the 11th. But
Okay.
if we wanted to do the 13th, or if we want to switch to Wednesday, just so that we're not on a
That's
holiday.
fine with me. I have no idea what my walking schedule is going to look like. So if I can still have a Zoom link, or we can keep doing this by Zoom, I don't
Walk
mind.
to the townhouse.
I can't. I'm on a boot. I'm not supposed to. I can't put any weight on it.
Just kidding.
Yeah.
I need to get one of those scooters, the electric ones, not the
The
knee.
knee, yeah. If it's the 13th, if it's 12 to 1, I can do that.
Okay, that would work for me.
You guys want to have it all on Zoom, or do you want to
Yeah,
meet?
let's say Zoom on the 13th, and that way we got all the bases covered and it's easy. We don't have to worry about plenty of room or your boot.
Because if I can walk, then I'm headed off to somewhere warm and tropical, Lee, right? I'm out of here. Wish. In my mind, I'm somewhere else. All right, that's
And
great.
then nothing's been distributed yet for the meeting on the 4th. No, okay. Make sure I'm not missing anything.
No, but Elizabeth, just before we log off, I want to go back to the stakeholder letter. To be clear, did we decide that this subcommittee is going to have its own specific letter?
Yes, I mean, that was my understanding, that we'd have our own, that it could reference, there are 3 subcommittee, the advisory committee is X, there are 3 subcommittees, we're the government affairs
So
subcommittee.
do you
Mark
also
is that.
think that this should go to the full board, or is this just gonna be something decided by you?
I think we should take it to the full board and.
The other
in-
one is,
Yeah, and in conjunction with that
So
spreadsheet.
the other one wasn't going to, that's why I'm asking.
Ah,
Okay, well, I think our feedback is that it probably ought to.
Yeah, I just
Yeah.
wanted to be clear because I need to let the community outreach group know
Right.
that, we're gonna take a quick pause and it should go to the full board.
Right,
yes,
and the idea would be that we'll communicate with the stakeholders that they've identified that we're in the lead on.
Okay,
but they should definitely not send anything out until we've also had a chance to look at that stakeholder list and see if there's someone we'd rather reach out to.
yep, all clear.
Awesome. Thanks, Shannon, for keeping your head around all of these pieces, because it's confusing.
Great.
All right, anything else?
No.
Thanks,
this is
everyone. It feels a
45.
lot more positive than it did a few weeks ago, so yay. Awesome.
So glad. Thank you both. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Shannon.